Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back to the podcast. My special guest today is Mr. Jason Lee, who does a podcast for the Economic Alliance of the Houston Port region, also a strong man of faith. Jason, good to have you on. And I wanted to have you come on and talk a little bit about both your business interests, your involvement with the Economic Alliance and doing podcasting, and of course, more especially, your faith, your journey in your faith. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Richard. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's put a little bit of context. Tell me a little about yourself and what you do for business and how you got involved with the Economic Alliance and how you turned into a podcaster yourself.
So I'm a Deer Park native originally. Spent a big chunk of my life out of Deer Park, and then about 6 years ago, I came to work for the organization that I'm a part of now. That organization serves privately held business owners, so we help them with people planning, exit planning, personal wealth, tax strategies. So basically, if it involves them, their people, or their money, we step into a space to serve them. And so I knew I wanted to help pursue privately held business owners. And at the time, my mom was working as the city secretary of Pasadena. So I went and took her to lunch and just said, "Hey, who are some good people to get connected to and that I should know?" And she highly recommended a few folks, and one of those people was Chad Burke from the Economic Alliance. It turns out through really a total God thing that I had actually been in a Bible study with Chad for about a year, right when I first came to Christ, and I had no idea that Chad did what he did. I didn't even have a clue. And so it was actually a real weird season in my life that I was there with Chad, and so it was perfect. I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, my mom says that you guys do this, and maybe I can meet some business owners." And he immediately invited me down to his office, and I became a member of the Economic Alliance. And then about a year into that, I recommended to Chad, and we kind of approached him with the idea of doing a podcast, and he loved the idea and was really supportive. And we kicked it off. And then as of this past Friday, I think we just finished our 134th or 135th episode. So it's been going strong for a long time now, and very, very humbled to be a part of it. It's a great organization, great people.
Okay. Wow, there's several things we can flesh out there. Okay,
Yeah.
coming to Christ, that's a big one, especially since this is a faith podcast, and then also the interest in podcasting. So before we go into the largest portion of this interview, which would be about faith, let's set up the podcasting. So was that something that you had always had an interest in? Had you done it before, or what led to that interest in pitching that to Chad?
Well, so whenever you join an organization and you're looking for ways to create an impact and do something, so there's first of all, their organization offers a tremendous amount of different committees and things you can serve on, and so I knew that they wanted to find ways to get their members involved, and so but the opportunity in and of itself to create a podcast felt like it was something that was just missing. The organization itself has got tremendous value content and things that it produces on a regular basis with events and things it does to help communicate, to share the vision and story of our region. But I just felt like, podcasting was kind of, really kind of taking a big turn back then. And it was like a missing ingredient for the organization. And so, that was really what it was led by. As just said, "Hey, this is not happening. You guys probably need it, and let's make it happen."
Right. Okay. Did you have any experience with that technology and, knowing which microphones to buy and interfaces
Oh
and
no,
anything
God,
like
no.
that?
No,
Okay.
our first. If you go back and track down the chronicles and go down to our first episodes, man, I'm pretty. I'll even have to go back and listen to them for fun. But no, we've had many different renditions. I mean, so we started out in the conference room there with a little uh, Yeti. I can't remember the name of the microphone, but it was some kind of Yeti microphone thing that plugged into my laptop with some type of tuner equipment that I downloaded, and I mean that was it, right? And then we were trying to leverage somebody there at the office to help us, kind of edit it and do our first rendition of it, and then from that time, we went out and managed to secure a few sponsors, and over the time we've gone from at one point in time Shell was a sponsor of ours. Now Chevron's a sponsor of ours. Apache Industrial is a sponsor of ours, and so those really kind of led to where we're at today. I mean, we went from probably a do-it-yourself kit to a full-fledged studio down there at the Economic Alliance now.
I've watched a few episodes over the last, I guess, couple of years, and I know what you're talking about the evolution of the setup and the evolution of the production quality and everything like that. And I know, like me and anyone that gets into this for the first time, you're starting with what you have. You don't know a whole lot. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you know someone who knows something, and they can kind of steer you the right way and help you avoid the wrong way of doing things. But I was recently watching one of the episodes, I guess maybe a few months ago, and noticed the nice silver Shure microphones you've got there, and you've got a really nice setup
Yeah,
there. Yeah. So
yeah,
when you go
it's been
into,
a big shift.
yeah, absolutely. So when you're
We're
going
very
into
blessed.
planning your episodes and stuff like that, are you just are you pulling off of things that you see out in the community and especially the business community yourself, or is it a team effort to put the content together? Talk about that.
Well, so first of all, we're very fortunate that with Chad's connections and the organization and the number of events and things that they put on, I probably have I would say a pretty distinct advantage. Meaning we have a distinct advantage to finding great quality guests because the organization does so much to serve the community. Lots of folks are willing to come on the show. I was just at an event 2 weeks ago, and there was two mayors of our local mayors at a local politician's table, and I mean it was as simple as walking up to them and saying, "Hey, I know you guys are involved with the Economic Alliance. I host a show. Can we have you come on the show?" And of course they were like, "Yes." And then it's have Chad's. We have somebody from Mandy from the office over there who will reach out on behalf of the organization, invite them to the show. So for us, it's pretty simple. We try to stay true to the mission of the organization and share stories about the things that impact our region, which is anything having to do with the upstream, downstream, or upstream, midstream, downstream cycle of oil and gas, chemicals, refining, logistics, supply chain, political action here in the region, and workforce development. So all of those things matter, right? How are we finding enough people to create enough jobs, and what jobs are being created because of the work in the refineries and the works that's going on and the capex projects that are being brought to our region. And then how do we continue to share that story and champion the message? And then I forgot sustainability. I think the world would have this kind of black eye associated with when they see those stacks. They think that's smoke. They don't realize that's steam. And so really we're trying to make sure that we champion the story that talks about how much safety goes into the work in our region, both, I mean, at every level, as well as how much focus is on sustainability and clean energy and ensuring that we're doing it the right way and protecting our earth.
Right. That's a really interesting subject to flesh out for just a second to help kind of buttress what you're saying about what the economic alliance does. I know years ago when I covered Deer Park for the broadcaster, I would go to many events that would be lunches that would be sponsored by the alliance or other community type events, and they would have people speaking on the improvements that the petrochemical industry has had to implement. Some of it because they did it themselves, they wanted to be proactive in it, and some of it was regulations through the EPA, and you can't do anything without the EPA breathing down your neck. So
Yeah.
I mean, the restrictions that are on the chemical industry to help it clean up more and to be more, I guess, proactive and being a little more environmentally friendly are certainly there. And like you say, I think a lot of people don't realize that they see stuff coming out of a pipe and they smell something and they think it's what a dirty industry, but it really is so much better than it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, I would say this region in particular leads the way, and is one of the best that there is when it comes to ensuring that we're meeting those type of standards. So it's again, people to go watch. I would encourage people to go watch our episodes, and you can track down the ones that typically involve the plant managers and those folks, and they're always telling the same story of
Right.
is the work they're doing for that specific thing.
hmm So you spoke earlier about meeting Chad Burke in a Bible study, and as you know, I've had him on this podcast a number of months ago. I've known him for years through our church involvement and other friends, and he's a great man of faith and a great businessman. A lot of people know him. Uh, Talk about how your relationship with him developed through the faith side. You talked about becoming a Christian. I guess maybe we could even just start there. When did you become a Christian, and what prompted that?
Oh, well, I guess I guess there's a couple different types of people who are walking with the Lord, right? There's people who were raised in it and they've known God and been part of their lives their whole life. And then there's people who kind of like Paul and a lot of the disciples, they were just uh, not maybe counterintuitive to doing what God wanted them to be doing, and then they kind of had an awakening moment that kind of got them to come to a place where they were ready to receive God. And I'm the second guy, so I was never anti-God, but was never really had him in my life at all. While he had been presented to me, my mom did the best she could to, make it a part of our home. Just she was a single mom, and so we were just never really had the time or the resources to be plugged into a community really. So she was just working a lot, and so in that process, it just never set with me. And so I kind of probably view church or people in the church uh, like a lot of people on the outside looking in, right? I thought they were judgy. I thought it was a bunch of rules. So I was just not a big fan. I think I looked at every pastor, and every time I walked into a church in my youth, I think the only thing that I heard was them ask me for money, which I never really understood that. So that was my general take on Christianity. It wasn't a thing for me. I got into my So 7 years ago, I accepted Christ into my life, and the process leading up to that was a pretty arduous, painful experience. I had to go basically through. I had to go through divorce. I did it. I went through divorce at the same time that I was trying to start a new career as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, everything from walking away from a steady paying job to 100% commission, trying to earn an income, then to go through divorce, trying to do all that. And then it was almost like, it was like a movie, right? Like everything that could go wrong just kind of consistently started going down wrong around me. And I started to, in an attempt to try to solve it, I decided I would try to walk my family into church and try to see if I could find some solutions. My first year or so of that was not very good. I basically embraced a very legalistic approach to what I heard, and it did not bear any fruit in my ex marriage nor in myself really. So I think I weaponized a lot of what I heard, and that was the wrong approach. So I really had to get all the way down to the bottom to just be like, okay, God, I'll take whatever you're going to give me here. And at that season, he brought a man into my life who then decided to disciple me, and so we started going through the Bible together, and that's when I actually heard the gospel kind of pulled out of the Bible and started to really understand my significance to our God and our Creator, and through that process, um, I really, like I said, I really kind of came back, and let me get that out there. I kind of came back and bounced back from that, and then accepted the Lord into my life, and I had to go back to Pasadena. So I spent the first half of my life working in fitness clubs with a group called 24 Hour Fitness.
Oh
So
yeah.
I worked all over the place. I had very high level, uh, running territories, moved out to the Midwest. So I was doing all this important stuff, and then I ran out of money at the bottom of my divorce. I had to raise the white flag and throw up the white flag and surrender. And in doing so, I had to call 24 Hour Fitness and ask for a job. And lo and behold, the only job they had to give me was in Pasadena, Texas, where I grew up. So I had to humbly go back to running a gym after having ran up to 18 at one point in time and
Hmm.
have had 500 employees. Here I am in my hometown, licking my wounds. broke and getting back on my feet, running a gym. And the very first week I was there, I got in a pretty heated exchange with a guy who was being loud at my front desk, and we uh, we bumped chests for a little bit, and then I ended up. I used to be a lot bigger. Now I wouldn't bump his chest; he's still way bigger than me. But but at the end of that argument, we actually ended up becoming friends and started talking a little bit. And I immediately started sharing my faith with them, and then he invited me to Bible study the next week, and I showed up to that Bible study, and it was Chad Burke and about three or four other really influential guys in the region that I had no idea. Jerry Mouton, mayor of Deer
Yep.
Park. There's
Mhm.
some pretty important people in that table, but I had no idea who they were. I just was invited to the Bible study. And so I spent about a year getting back on my feet at that gym and meeting with these guys every Tuesday and developed great relationships with them. And then fast forward a couple years later, I stepped into this role after I'd moved on, and one thing led to another. And you know that Bible study produced Chad Burke, who's become a great mentor and a friend through that organization. It produced one of my very best clients, and it produced one of my very best referral partners who has referred me to some of my first clients. All came out of that Bible study, which is pretty crazy to
Mhm.
show you what God would do. So
Mhm. And it's interesting that a lot of times you have to hit rock bottom before you can, I guess, do a certain amount of self discovery, self reflection in order to kind of crawl your way back out of the hole that you found yourself in.
oh
I
yeah.
know I've been through that myself. Obviously, your story says you have as well. Uh, were there times during that process that you just did you ever just want to just give up, or would you just think, you know what, I know I'll eventually make it out of this. I just need a little direction. What was your approach to getting yourself out of that position?
Well, you know, first of all, I think it's human nature and our survival instincts kick in, and so I have a little girl who's not little anymore. She's 14, but at the time she was little, and so she's my kind of driving force at the time, and so there was no way I was going to just fail. But when you have when you're a man and you have a little girl brought into your life, it changes you, makes you want to be a better man, try to understand how to be a better man. And so, I knew that I was going to do that. And then when what God kind of gave me clarity on was that my manliness or my role or my success was not defined by my job or my career, but really by my ability to apply the gifts and things that He's given me, orchestrate and build him into my life, and then have that then transfer to my daughter and try to that's really what our legacy is kind of comprised of. And so that was the decision for me. Is I was like, there's just once I got Christ into my life, it wasn't a matter of failing. It was just like everything was. I knew that, and again, I'm not a prosperity guy or any of those things. I
Right.
don't believe in that stuff. I've had plenty of crap happen since I've come to the Lord that's not been prosperous.
Hmm.
But I've also had great things land on my lap. But I think at the end of the day, when you say how did I kind of get through it, or it was always with this kind of hope and this restorative feeling of knowing that I wasn't doing it alone, right?
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
and that these obstacles were preparing me or sharpening me and making me prepared for something else. I didn't ever really understand that before I came to the Lord, and once I started to understand God and how He works on us, I started to really understand that our obstacles are shaping us and forming us, and that's something that in the past I didn't really, it no pain no gain sounds like something, but when you
Right.
really think about it and apply it from a biblical perspective, you really start to get some insight as to what what you're doing. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Definitely. So when you became a Christian, did you find the experience transformative immediately, or is it something that you noticed over time? Because you'll talk to people and they'll say, as soon as I did that, I just felt this overwhelming sense of freedom, and my life was never the same. And then other people will say, Yes, I felt the difference, but I noticed it more as my life, my spiritual life, my life as a faithful person began to develop. What did you
Mm.
find?
Interesting, great question. So I received Christ into my life and dedicated my life through him and through baptism on March 16, 2016. Um, I tell people I received the Holy Spirit about 4 months later. And so what I can tell you is that in the time that I had said that I was giving my life to Christ through baptism, I still was kind of in that like fledgling stage of I knew I wanted this. I knew I wanted God in my life. I was at the bottom of my heart and ready to receive him. But in Luke, and well, it's actually in all the gospels, but there's a part where Jesus says we have to lay down our cross, right? We have to be willing to die to ourselves. And that means everything, our previous beliefs, everything that we kind of had wired into our brain. And so I didn't really grasp that. So when I gave my life to Christ, I was saying all the right stuff, but internally, I was still wrestling. I was wrestling with the fact that I felt like I was a loser. I was wrestling with the fact that I felt like, here I am starting out that I'd never find another woman. I was wrestling with the fact that, um, I was going back to work at a gym where I started when I was a kid. Like I mean, in my head, I'm thinking like all this stuff's going on. So I'm out here, posting all these cool Bible verses, but internally, I'm still wrestling with the flesh. Like I'm looking at what the world says I should be, right? As opposed to, I'm conforming to the pattern of the world and saying, oh man, I've got all these loser characteristics, but oh, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. And so I think God saw that and said, okay, hey, it's not going to work. So we're going to get you down a little further. So I actually, when I accepted the job back at 24 Hour Fitness, mind you, I'd worked there for 16 total years.
Hmm.
But they had all kinds of problems hiring me back. And so what was amazing was I ended up for 42 days. I was really basically without work. I had left my previous work, which I was already running out of money because I was working for myself. But so I walked away from that, said I would go back to 24 Hour Fitness, and I thought in 2 weeks I'd have a paycheck.
Right.
That was not the case. It ended up being 42 days before I could even start. So almost a full 6 weeks before I got a paycheck. And so, I mean, I'm like running on fumes on my dollars in my bank account. And, that process though, all I had to do every day, I mean, I cut off a lot of my spending. I wasn't going out, I was just literally eating, going to the gym and going home and reading the Bible. That's it. And anyway, so he woke me up one night. I was having like what I thought to be an anxiety attack. And I woke up and he put me on that verse and it was, if you have to lay down your life and you have to bear your cross for me. And the only thing that I heard was, okay, I'm not really like I said I'm willing to give my life to him, but I'm like still harboring all these personal things. Like all this stuff, I got to give him everything, which is all my pride and all this stuff that I used to be and all the guy that I thought I was. And so and he basically says, walk away from your mother, your father, everything. So I'm like, it's like I need to just walk away from it all and I need to become his. And so I kind of said that night to him. I said, okay, God, I'm ready to do it all. And then about 3 days after that, man, I just left the gym, and I can see it like a movie, man. I was like, I'm at a stoplight. There's this really cool song by a guy named Jeremy Camp called "Sweetly Broken," and that song was on, and I just feel music in a certain way, and it was just speaking to me. And then that's the moment that I received what I call the Holy Spirit
Hmm.
because I basically just felt His presence like overwhelm me. I felt warmth and love, and I just kind of started breaking down, and then yeah, I went. I mean, I just kind of disappeared for a few hours, right, just weeping, and I just went through this whole thing, and then I kind of came up from it mentally and was like, okay, I'm like when Paul says we're a new creation, like at that moment, I was a new creation. Like it was like I felt all this peace, all this stuff. I'd been wrestling with some illness stuff. It all went away. Like
Hmm.
I didn't have nothing changed, but I was just like, I just felt like the world was going to be fine. And so for about my first 2 years in that, man, it was like the Bible stuff started jumping off the page. Everything just, I mean, it was just digesting everything that I could in the Lord. And he was putting me in all these cool opportunities to share my testimony. So it was really cool. And then like it's kind of like everything, you get in this mountaintop experience and then life happens.
Hmm.
And you've got, there's something powerful, Richard, about being at the bottom, because when you're at the bottom, everything's
Yeah.
up.
Hmm.
So now 3 years later, he restored my life, gave me a new wife, gave me a new job, gave me all these things. Um, and with all that came back the responsibilities and all that stuff. So I felt like now all of a sudden, you're trying to do a blended family and you're trying to run clients and you're trying to sell and you're trying to make time for God and you're trying to make time for your fitness. So you're trying to make time for all these things that everybody's wrestling with. And then the world will get a hold of that. And as soon as the devil can just get his grips on that stuff, you can be going through the motions, and catch yourself going through the motions, right? And then so when you asked about the change, I had a really dramatic change, and then I had stuff start kind of wearing on me and wear me down. And then what I realized is just kind of like your fitness, like you might lose that first 20 pounds, and then it just becomes a monotonous grind just to get to the gym every day to keep it off. But you realize in the big picture, you're still stronger and more fit than most people. And
Hmm.
that's what I kind of started to see now. Is like, something will hit me, or I'll get a trouble, or something will happen, and I'm thinking like, okay, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, this would have caused me to have a go straight to alcohol or straight to something else to lose my stress. Now I just don't do that. I just don't stress, right? Like I think stuff happens, and stresses me out, but I just kind of have learned to give it to God and trust His plan. So, but we're never there, right? If anybody tells you they've made it, they're lying. So they got a problem with God.
Yeah, you're making it, but you've never really made it.
No,
that's,
God, no.
that's true. Paul talks in Corinthians about running your race, your race to
Mm-hmm.
win. And anyone that's ran a race, whether you're doing it as part of track and field or something like that. I mean, it's a journey. Even if it's a 40-yard dash, there's still 40 yards that you're having to cover. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just take one step and you're finished. So, and a lot of those steps you may stumble, and hopefully you pick yourself back up and you just keep going. You see the finish line in the end. And so that's the constant goal to try to reach, and hopefully you reach that in a good way and not in a bad way.
Yeah.
So the Bible studies that you participate in, and I know that Chad participates in, have you seen other people come to that? Is it something that's just for I guess, friends, a small group? Or talk about those Bible studies and maybe the impact that you've seen that the results of those studies have on other people.
Well, so at that time, it was always just about the same five or six of us,
Hmm.
and I think that was by design. I moved, so I no longer go to that study, but I've been a member into a group of several of those different studies at different seasons, and I have different types of groups that I'm a part of. So I think your question was, have you seen things come from them, or what things have you seen come from groups? I'll just share some generalized things that
Sure.
I've observed. Number one, I think a consistent group that meets regularly, and that has a kind of a really, I think more of a pro a, they don't they're more restrictive, meaning they get to a number and then they stop, and then that number is who's in the group, and then people don't come in and out. Because I've seen both. I've seen groups where it's just kind of a hodgepodge. The problem is when people are coming in and out, you don't ever really get any depth because
Right.
people don't really feel comfortable sharing. So what you might hit on a lot of topics, but it's like an extension of church, like a sermon. So it's just going to a group discussion about a sermon. But unless somebody's willing to get open, and talk about the ugly stuff in their life. So I've been in some very superficial, high level Bible study groups, which are great. But unless somebody's opening up about porn, stress, work, drugs, unless that stuff starts to get real, you're not really, I mean, God's in working every one of those things, but the best ones have always been the close ones, where that group was tight knit and people weren't in and out, because that's when, and it doesn't happen overnight, but through that trust, those relationships really start to open up, and then you can get to the meat and potatoes of what might really be going on in people's lives. But I will say this: in every one of those groups that had those small bonded groups that I've been a part of in the 7 years that I've been walking, and I'm still in 2 groups right now. Each one of those groups is small, and we're all connected. But those relationships, even as the groups have separated, those relationships continue on. So I think we need that, and I think especially men are in desperate need of it, because the camaraderie and the depth of what we're having to fight every day. You need that to go into war with other guys that are experiencing the same. I mean, women need it too, but I think there's a special thing that men glean from that kind of stuff. I think we just, for lack of a better term, we're kind of gluttons for punishment. You
Mm-hmm.
know, most men I've seen like to show up and then have another man be like, "That's not going to work, dude. Like, you got to get your head together." Like, we kind of walk into that kind of stuff, especially
Right.
when you're in Christ.
Yeah. You know, if you look on YouTube, you don't have to go very far to find all these self-help videos and motivational videos. They're all over Facebook and Instagram as well. And the central theme, at least from my perspective, is it's all about you and what you can get. Take it, you're a king,
Hmm.
you're a this, you're a that, and it kind of paints men as some sort of barbarian and not some sympathetic person with leadership qualities,
Right.
but someone who can sympathize with other people. It's a narcissistic point of view. And then you juxtapose that with a Christian point of view, where, as you said earlier, it's more about giving yourself to God, uh, you know, subverting yourself to His will, and in the process helping lift up other people, family, friends, people in the community, etc. Did you find that same thing when maybe you're going through a difficult time, and like when a lot of people do, you may look for a motivational this or that, and I know you were turning to the Bible, which is a good thing to do, but sometimes you do look around and see, well, who's successful, and maybe I can model some ideas off of them, and talk about your own perspectives with the way a lot of men are sort of expected or preached to, coached to through these videos, as opposed to what we're called to do in the Bible.
Great call out. You really hit a tone with me on that deal, because I think one of the systemic issues that is lying in our current society, that we're all battling, is that everything is about self-help, and it's all about you and you and you and you and more you, right? I mean, used to, you would go to the Grand Canyon and take a picture of the Grand Canyon. Now you go to the Canyon and take a picture of you with the Grand Canyon behind you. And so that's kind of become the thing, right? And so, and then every book and everything is always about you. And so, and then I think we've also created a world where, as men, um, it's not kosher to ask for help, or to be vulnerable, or be transparent, or share your pain. So a lot of that stuff is hidden, and not really talked about. And so, yeah, I think when you ask about, have I experienced it? Well, yeah, because I think our default mechanism is to go to a YouTube video, or to go click on someone's anything to try to seek some type of motivation. But what you got to remember is that motivation, when I found it, is only temporary, right? It gives me a motivational boost, but it doesn't really change my operating system. And when I find myself in a rut, it's usually, I might get something to get me up out of the rut, but the only way that I can consistently and daily sustain my energy and my enthusiasm, my motivation, is through uh, continuously grinding through what God's doing, right?
Mm.
And being able to trust in that, which is also very sacrificial, right? Like, I mean, you know, I think right now in the mental environment that we see, people go, "Oh, well, you're struggling with this, go do this, take care of you, take care, whereas, as men, we're kind of called to take care of others and do these other things. And so in the Christian and biblical sense, the only way that you can kind of carry that kind of load, but not let it wear you down, is knowing that you can hand off a lot of that burden to the Lord, right? And so, the best way I can describe it is I listen to and participate with all these different books to try to sell better because I'm in outside sales, and it helps me with scripting, it helps me with tactics, it helps me with organization. Those are all technical things that I do from the course of a book, but at the end of the day, they don't provide the outcome, right? So meaning they just give me the behaviors to apply. But the outcome is still, like, for me, from a stress perspective, I'm actually still able to place the outcome on God, which changes the whole dynamic for a guy who sold his whole life. Because
Right.
when I used to sell in the past, it was like, if that's not happening, then I'm wrecking my brain. I'm stressed out. I'm causing all this stuff. Now it's like I can go through a whole week, and I mean, maybe I do everything right. I don't know. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what deals happened or didn't happen or why they didn't happen. But at the end of the day, I can still say that's God. Like, either He wants me to have it or He doesn't. And while that might sound like an acceptance of failure, like, okay, you're okay failing, it's not, because in reality, you can give the perfect presentation, you can do all the things perfectly, but sometimes that stuff just doesn't happen. And then
Hmm.
there's other times when you didn't do anything right, and a deal comes out of the woodworks and lands in your lap, and you're like, okay. So I try to just really hand that to God and say, okay, you're responsible for in Corinthians, you quoted that earlier, but it's not the one who waters or the one who plants or the one who waters is anything, but it's only God who makes things grow.
Right.
So that's kind of like has really helped me apply this kind of, I can go listen to these tools and tactics to kind of sharpen a skill, but my reliance still has to come from the truth.
Hmm. It doesn't take very long to look on social media and see the posts with the nice scriptures, and the scriptures I always find them always relevant. It's amazing how you see something and you think that's what I needed to see right then. Man, who had this person know I was struggling with this type of thing? We see that a lot, but I know from my own personal experience in life that what motivated me and inspired me the most were to see people who didn't necessarily, they weren't necessarily the ones that would be the first to throw a Bible verse out there, but you would see it in their life. You would just see how they lived their life. You would maybe recall conversations you had with them, and they would bring up something that really inspired them about the Bible, or just a practical application of what we consistently read in the Bible. Have you had similar experiences with that, and maybe share an anecdote about someone who's I guess the way they just conducted themselves, the way their life was, maybe meant to you more than the people who are constantly sending out the social media stuff all the time?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, uh, Chad Burke is a great example of that. So, I mean, Chad and another guy named Steve Cody, who's
Mm-hmm.
in the area, another great man. Um, uh, Thomas Briscoe is another great example of that. So, I can just name a couple of guys, but you know, these are guys that who approach and handle their daily lives in a way that you just know they're doing the right thing, and then that they're attempting to go out in the world and do the right thing. And so you can watch but even though they're not all hype and buzz about uh, God, they're at their core, that's how they're operating. And Chad is a great example of that because he does everything. He carries himself with integrity. He walks in the room with integrity. Everybody understands he represents integrity. Steve Cody's another great example of that in the area of guys who do that. The guy who really got me into church was a great example of that, and he never talked to me about church at all. But I approached him in the gym, and he had been through a divorce, and I kind of picked up while I was in the season of divorce. I learned that from him, but something about him, he was always cared about other people, always asking questions about me, always wanting to know, understand what I'm going through. And here's just this guy in the gym. And enough that I just was like, hey, I don't know what you got, but I want what you got, you know? Um,
Right.
and it was literally like that. I was like, I want, like, I don't know what you've got, but you seem to like have it all figured out. Super peaceful. He, even when something was bad, and when he was talking about his ex, he'd be like saying the craziest thing about her, but it wasn't like he was cussing and being all mad. He was like, man, I had to deal with this, but it didn't, but his joy and even describing bad stuff, I was like, something's up with that guy. And then that's kind of ultimately how I ended up in my first Bible study. It wasn't with Chad, those guys, but was
Mhm.
through that. And then that's the Bible study that I met the guy that discipled me. So
Hmm.
you never know who you could be. I mean, here's a guy who's his life, the way he's living it, drew me into a Bible study where then I got discipled by a guy in that same Bible study. And
Okay. And
and this guy that,
can you
go
mention
ahead.
both of their names?
Oh yeah, the guy that brought me into this Bible study. His name is Kerry Cox. He's still a good friend of mine. Lives in Pearland. We were all New Hopers. There's a church called New Hope over there. So Kerry's great, man. Kerry's awesome. And then the guy that discipled me is a guy named Sam Tischler.
Okay.
So yeah.
Hmm. And Jason, talk about the importance of Bible studies. Maybe trying to connect with one, search one out, however you may find one. Uh, how that relates to strengthening your faith overall, because a lot of people may join a church, they may become a Christian, and they just go to church, say every Saturday, every Sunday, or Wednesday, or something like that. But then that's it. That's kind of the end all be all of their existence,
Mm-hmm.
as far as faith is concerned. What are the merits and what are the benefits of trying to find supplements outside of that, outside of going to church every weekend?
Well, I guess my question, right, is if you want it, the best analogy I can give you is if you wanted to lose weight, get in shape, feel better, and have a longer and healthier life, right? You would probably exercise regularly, eat well, a good diet, sleep well. So there's behavior changes that have to take place. You wouldn't take up Sunday and say, okay, I'm going to eat super clean on Sunday. I'm going to fast all day. And then I'm going to work out 3 times on Sunday. I'm going to work out first thing in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. And then hope that by doing all that Sunday, you would be able to, for 6 days, do whatever you want. Um, you know, you would look at that health plan and go, that doesn't make any sense. Like you need to be doing this regularly. And so what I've found, and then the next thing I would say is if you go into, and having been in fitness for years, things like CrossFit, the reason why they're so popular or why people go to group exercise classes or they do these other classes is because there's something innately human about us, about our desire to be part of something. And so whether you're in a CrossFit group or you're doing jujitsu, which is really popular now, people have found other outlets. It used to be you just went to the gym and you were by yourself, but now they have all these group studio concepts where people do group fitness. The whole point is people want to be part of something. So I think what we all crave and all want is a community. And you're not going to get that, you know, at a church. Like you'll get it on Sunday, but you'll be missing something. I mean, I just left our church after my whole entire Christian life, having been in the Lord, being at the same church with my family. We had to move. We moved. We got the opportunity to move to the other side of town for my daughter, and in doing that, we just started church shopping, and I went to a new church, and it was weird, right? I didn't see anybody I knew, so I was the
Hmm.
new guy, and and I listened to the sermon, and there was things that I was looking for that were like my church, and I'm comparing, and so I'm doing all these things, and I'm thinking like, and here I am wanting to be here, wanting to get involved, and I'm still feeling out of place. Can you imagine what it would feel like if you weren't really like bought in all the way? I mean, it would be hard because if you're just showing up on Sunday, there still didn't feel like there was a community. So I immediately started asking questions about what things can we get plugged into that would allow us to have that community part.
Mm-hmm. You
Support.
right. With your sales and your management experiences as a backdrop, when you talked earlier near the beginning of this episode about early experiences going to church, and you had maybe some preconceived notions, or maybe just something you picked up in the first services you went to that was a little off-putting. Now, bringing that back into your experience as a salesperson and with manager experience, where do we go wrong with not necessarily trying to convince people to become a Christian? That's something I think God does, but I think we do have a role to play in, as we said earlier, maybe the way we conduct ourselves, the way we help people and stuff like that, to get people to look at us a little bit and say, there's something different about that person. They seem to be at peace. Where do churches and Christians in general go wrong with presenting their faith to others?
Oh man. Well, first thing is I think that one of the bigger challenges that we have right now is that we sometimes try to tackle issues that like that you can't win. Like they're meaning they're wars that are going to be fought forever and they'll never end. And what I mean by that is just take any number of them, right? And for the sake of being PC on this podcast, I won't start naming them,
Sure.
but you can pick anyone, right? Any one of the main things that people are at war on TV or whatever about. And what happens is I think as a society we latch into those, and sometimes our ideology creeps into our theology, and we start trying to champion things that 100 years from now they're still going to be fighting about,
Right.
right? And so you're like, okay, so we can fight this fight. There's never going to be a victory here. You'll never fight. But the reality is, a lot of those cases, you're never going to bring anybody to the Lord through that process. Especially if you're knocking them down along the way. So it's like, why not take that fight and fight it in hand-to-hand combat? Like, so if you're passionate about that, you're more likely to succeed taking, let's just we'll use abortion. And then we say, but you'd be better suited, not that you can't go champion the importance of not having abortion, but when we start talking about these things at a very high level and to a very broad audience, you're never really able to connect to those individuals. So where you could do your work is going into environments where maybe there's people who you want to connect with that are perhaps experiencing that, or maybe in that situation or that scenario, and then talk to them like a person. Just
Mm-hmm.
meet them where they're at and have a discussion with them. And when they ask you, right? So, and I can't remember the scripture, but the scripture says, always be prepared to give a testimony for the hope that you have, right?
Right.
For the joy that you have. But he's always saying, be prepared when someone asks you, right? And so I think part of the biggest challenge that we have is we take all this theology, ideology stuff, and we just start screaming it at people, and then acting like they're supposed to receive it, and then but not really meeting them where they're at, and so I think the biggest opportunity lies in that. The church today is, I think, its biggest uphill battle is like we've got to stay true to our belief systems. We cannot waver on those things. So those things have to be true. If it's in God's word, it needs to be in the body. But at the same time, we don't have to go out and attack other people with it. We can, let's get those people in a conversation. Let's get that person in the situation, because you're never going to change anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Your sermon, your motivational quote, your post, the only person who's changing somebody is God.
Right.
So sometimes I think we get a little too hyped about what we think we're capable. God doesn't need us. God can do whatever he wants. So I think it's really about going and loving on people. He said the top two commands were love him and love others. So if we can step into that space and just be there, like you said, someone's going to say, like I did with Carrie, right? Like, we were in the gym. I talked to this dude for probably 3 or 4 months while I was going through all this stuff. He never was like, man, let me pull out a pamphlet and start hitting me on,
Right.
especially as I was kind of being promiscuous after being single now and making poor life decisions, he was never coming after me to start telling me all the wrong stuff I was doing. He was just listening and asking questions and stuff, but he always seemed to have his mind together, his heart together, to the point that I finally asked him, like, what do you got? What's up with you, man? You're different. And that's when he was like, well, let me tell you. And then that's when he got to tell me the gospel.
Mhm.
People should be able to look at us and go, something's different.
Right.
You know?
Right. And if they can't look at you and see that you're really no different than they are, what's your advice for that person?
If they can't see that you're no different, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
if you're a believer and you've got people around you who treat you just like everybody else, and they're never commenting on the fact that, you know, hey, good for you, you've made some good choices. If you're doing everything they're doing,
Oh,
we
wow.
can easily kind of slide back and into just kind of assimilating into everyone around us and not remembering what we're called to be. What's your advice to them?
Well, that's the hardest one, right? Because I think I know for me, I have first we all fall short. So just because you're in Christ doesn't mean you've got to figure it out.
Right.
But I do know of those situations where we wear different hats, and if you're like, here's a good example. I still have friends from my before Christ days, and we go hang out and do whatever. We still go play golf and do different things, and that those guys don't act different around me. I don't try to be different around them,
Hmm.
but there's certain things from a conversation perspective that I'm just not going to do, right? Or certain places, once we've gotten off the golf course or doing whatever, and then they're going to head off to a certain space. If it doesn't, if it doesn't, there's a, I got a playing field that I stay in now, out of respect for my God, out of respect for my wife, out of respect for my job, out of respect for the economic alliance that I'm a part. So there's certain things I'm just not going to do, and
Right.
they know. But I also don't make it a point to be around them like and acting like I'm a high almighty. I just said
Sure.
they've learned, I guess, for lack of a better term, they've learned to say, okay, Jason's played golf with us today. We've had a good time. Man, that was a lot of fun. We're gonna go do some stupid stuff now, and we know just to keep Jason out of this because I've
Right.
conditioned him to say, okay, man, I'm out. Like, I appreciate you guys, love you, be safe. Call me if you need me to come pick you up, that kind of thing. So I think it's learning to be with the people, out with the folks, but also if you catch yourself where you can comfortably fit in that and no one's noticing that you're different, then you probably need to have a wake up call or a discussion and start asking yourself, are you really, walking the walk?
Hmm. So many people think they've screwed up too much for God to ever love them and give them another chance, for
Well,
God to forgive them. And I know a lot of people like that. I know plenty of believers who believe the same thing. I'll be honest and say I think all of us, I've probably felt that way. And know I've felt that way in times of my life. And in time, you realize when that problem abates, it's just you being a little too hard on yourself and not really letting God be the God that He is, the loving God. Uh,
mm,
but for people who are struggling, whether they have not become a Christian yet, maybe they were in the position you were in where you're having a hard time in your life, you needed to hit rock bottom, and you're looking for a way out, hopefully the right way out, or it's someone who has faith, but their faith, for whatever reason, life situations, who knows, has knocked them back a few pegs, and they're not really where they were and where they know they need to be. What's some of your advice on that before we close?
um, you know, uh, I was completely. I mean, I was a good human for the most part, but I did a lot of bad stuff in my life, um, and for a lot of reasons. And as I reflect on those things and think about the person, um, you know, I so, I'm sorry. Let me back up. There was a few weeks ago. There was my daughter was leaving for Bible camp, and I knew that there were kids because she told me that there were kids who were being made to go, told that they had to go. So there were kids who were being sent off to camp for a week as some type of reform,
Hmm.
right? And I thought, man, gosh, that's brutal. Like they're gonna the whole. Now the good news is God was going to be there. Who knows what He was going to do, right?
Right.
But and I thought about myself, right? And I thought about kids and people that I've met along the way, and we don't know what your story was. We don't know what led to those things. I know that my story was created by a lot of decisions I made were my desire to fit in, were my desire to not be alone, were my desire to have a group that I could be a part of, and that was a bad group. And so, a lot of our decisions are made for all these things. And I thought, and I honestly started weeping thinking about those kids because they were there probably against their will with this, like, with all this head trash that's already in there, and then it's manifested and compounded today by social media because everybody makes you think that their lives are perfect, they've got it figured out. Everybody's more successful than the next guy next. It's like everything is hyper. They've got filters on everything. Nobody looks normal, right? Like everybody's got a
Right.
filter on, and so it's like all this stuff is designed back to this. It's just an evil one wrapping up in this thing to make you think that you're not capable and you're not worthy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, man, is like if there's anything I could tell one person is if you'll just take a step towards God, He created this longing in you. So that missing piece that's like, what is that? Like I tried it through money, drugs, alcohol, women. I've gone through travel. I've done everything you can do on this earth trying to fill this gap that I did not know existed until I found Christ. And once I found it, I never longed for anything else. It was the one thing that was like it was the missing piece. And so that's what I would tell people is that you don't doesn't matter what you've done. Um, he wants you, you're part of the family, and he just wants you to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. Well, Jason, I think we'll leave it there on the high note. That's a very good way to end this podcast. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences that both led you to Christ and also have helped strengthen your faith as you've come along in the last several years that you've become a Christian.
My Richard, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing. I love it.
Thank you.